The world that we live in sucks. Everything is confusing and sad and frustrating and angry and disappointing and just plain lame. Well, let me introduce you to my cult. My cult is all about the levels of reality we find ourselves engaging with on a daily basis. If you're watching this video, I'm going to assume that you live in a place that allows you to consume way too much media like this, and it is severely influencing your mental health. Well, in truth, I do too, and this is my way of coping while trying to find a little bit of fun in my terrible first world problem of overconsuming. Because I have nothing better to do. It all comes down to one thing. Stories. This is real life, the most boring level of reality. Life is filled with so much mundane nothingness that is inherently uninteresting, but unfortunately, it's the most realistic form of reality that we know today. Reality is filled with little action, tons of bureaucracy, and not much else. All this leads to pretty much anything taking forever to accomplish and is quite uninteresting most of the time. Of course, life has its excitement, but the reality of the situation is that for the vast majority of us, those exciting events are maybe 5% of our entire life, while the rest is pretty ordinary, day-to-day living. I know I'm making reality sound like a bad thing, but it isn't. It's the best thing in existence, because it is quite literally the only thing that we know of in our existence. That 5% of life that has action can be truly amazing. Whether it be hiking up a mountain and getting an amazing view, your first nervous kiss in a Waffle House parking lot, or the thrill of buying your first home. If that'll ever even be possible. These events, these stories, are truly what make life worth living. But there's still that 95% of life to live. The boring stuff, filled with work days, school projects, and lots of boredom and exhaustion. Something has to fill that time up. Content is the go-to escapist form of entertainment. It's quick, it's easy, and it does not require much brain power. TV and movies can provide that 5% of life whenever you want it. Why actually halo jump out of a plane and potentially die when I could just watch Tom Cruise do it? Or why have a bunch of nuclear bombs explode and have to live in a horrible post-apocalyptic future when I could just watch Fallout? This type of content doesn't necessarily have to be the most exaggerated thing of all time. Look at something like a biopic. These films are almost always about a real person that actually lived in our reality. But the filmmakers of these movies understand that reality can be kinda boring, and it might not make for very good cinema. So what do? They stretch the truth a little bit in order to make the story they're telling appeal to a wider film-loving audience. Of course, there's some ethics and other things wrong with bending the truth in such a way, and I fully acknowledge and understand those arguments, but I feel like most viewers are informed enough that these are creative decisions being made to make the reality of the situation feel much more exciting than it actually was. If you want facts and just the facts, that's what documentaries and books are for. This combination of fact and fiction to create a sort of warped reality is a perfect example of combining realities 1 and 2. Media like this can show us the most exciting event that would ever happen in the history of reality and treat it like it's nothing. Just another plot point to move the story forward. That's what level 2 is ultimately about. Stories. Human beings love stories. We always have and we always will. Stories can be extremely profound in the ways that they affect people's lives. A good story can truly change a person. They're a way for us to escape reality and imagine ourselves in these larger-than-life scenarios that we would normally never get to live out in our own reality. But what if we could actually do that in some way? You can actually do that in some way. It's called a video game. Yeah, I know, big shocker. I'm sure you can see where this is going. You want to be an awesome space guy who murders a shit ton of aliens, play a multitude of these games. Do you want to be in a fantasy world that's far out of the realm of anything that would be considered possible? Play any of these. Want to do literally anything? Play Minecraft. Video games have the ability to be some of the most immersive and interesting experiences a person can have. They're so far from reality that they can sometimes make reality worse, almost as if you're getting sucked into them, addicted. You can go so far as to actually put them on your head and stream them directly into your eyeballs, and it will feel like you are quite literally within the world of the game. Video games are perhaps the most unique form of entertainment to ever be invented. They're the next logical step of storytelling. We as a species have evolved our storytelling capabilities from word of mouth to text to video to now video games. It is a truly remarkable achievement that we taught this rock how to play Halo. As amazing as this is, there is still a slight hiccup in the third level of reality: the story itself. In contrast to movies and TV, video games have often been ridiculed for not having the most engaging plots of all time. This is mainly due to these games needing to also include actual gameplay, so the player can feel like they're truly moving the events of the story forward. The problem with this is that in order to make said gameplay interesting, storytelling is often put to the back foot. In 2007, a former LucasArts creative lead named Clint Hawking coined the term ludonarrative dissonance. The basic idea of this term is the separation of gameplay and narrative elements in video games. This term can be seen in effect in all sorts of games. Most famously, it's been a major point of criticism in the Uncharted series. The main character, Nathan Drake, is portrayed as a lovable, relatable rogue. But in the gameplay sections, the player murders hundreds of potentially innocent people as Nathan Drake, all for the sake of player enjoyment and retention. If these two parts of the game were taken all in the same context, it would be very hard to relate to Nathan Drake as a character, because of all the heinous things he does while you control him. Ludonarrative dissonance is there to remind us that as the player, these two things can be seen as separate entities. My new favorite example of this is the Fallout franchise. It's a great example of the second and third levels of reality. Level 2 being the recently released Fallout TV show, and Level 3 being the multitude of Fallout games. In the Fallout games, the player character is tasked multiple times throughout the series to commit a multitude of mass murders. Some for the sake of story, but mostly for the sake of gameplay. In reality, a Vault Dweller wouldn't stand a chance against most of what the Wasteland has to offer. But since Fallout is a video game, it gives the player the freedom to do whatever the hell they want and be whoever the hell they want to be, which can lead to the mass murder of hundreds of in-game NPCs while still being heralded as a hero. This is ludonarrative dissonance to a T. My personal philosophy behind this is to have my own sort of headcanon, where the narrative bits of games like this are canon, but the bits where I'm murdering so many potentially innocent raiders like it's nothing are sort of pseudo-canon. What this means is that those events may have happened in one way or another, but the reality of the situation is much less bombastic and blood-filled. I never thought that we would be able to see anything that's not a game in the Fallout universe, just because that's the nature of these video games. That was until we got the Fallout TV series. The series takes a much more grounded in reality approach, still not level 1 levels of reality, but a lot more realistic than a video game would be. Take this scene for example. Our two main characters come across a bridge with two weird looking Wastelander people in the middle. If this were a Fallout video game, we could easily blast through those two, no problem. But since it's a TV series, and it tries to ground itself in some sort of reality, it takes the time to show how an encounter like this might actually go. It's slow, intense, up until the very last second. It still has that sense of action and narrative that Level 2 is known for, but it's not nearly as gamey as Level 3. There are instances like this all throughout the show. Points that seem like they're right out of a video game, but are less hyper-exaggerated than in game because of the nature of the medium. And those more grounded segments are only possible because what they're trying to imitate is our reality, the reality of Level 1. I think that's really interesting, that you can portray different stories in the same fictional world with vastly different mediums and make it work so seamlessly. So why am I talking about this topic in a video about the levels of reality? Ludonarrative dissonance is inherently the separation of reality within another reality. It's a sort of fourth level of reality that even in the hyper reality that is video games, we still need to separate the craziness from the grounded. What I'm trying to get at here is that these levels of reality are not cemented in stone. They can overlap with each other to make even more interesting, quote-unquote, sub-realities within other realities. All of this is in the interest of telling better stories. Because at the end of the day, that's what humans like. Reality is a very stupid and confusing thing. These levels may make no sense to you, or you may think that they're far-fetched and overthought about, and that's fine, because in truth, yeah, they are. But the reality that we live in doesn't make much sense either. Nothing really makes sense. We're all just a bunch of kinda smart monkeys trying to figure shit out. And one of those monkeys made a confusingly arbitrary list of media about how it affects our ways of thinking. But within these levels of reality are stories that in one way or another give us a better understanding of the reality that we live in. The comfort of watching a funny movie or playing a cozy game, or the knowledge gained in watching a documentary or playing Brain Age on the Nintendo DS. These are all just little stories to keep us going in our everyday lives. Because in the end, who doesn't like a good story? Because story never changes. Good night, everybody.